a lot of entrepreneurship and even personal growth is training yourself on how you respond to hard. Because in the early days, hard was, ooh, stop. This isn't good. I should, this is a warning sign. This is a red flag. I should slow down, or I should stop, I should pivot. But the more I think about it as a competitive landscape, as I'm clear on what this path is supposed to look like, and these rocks and these dragons are things that I'm going to have to slay along the way to get the princess or get the treasure, I get happier about the harder it is because I know that no one else will follow.
It's a selection effect.
And I think if you can shift from this is hard to no one else will be able to do this, then it flips from being this thing that you're like, oh, poor me, to oh, poor everyone else who's going to have to fucking try.
Yeah.
And I think that is so much more motivating as a frame for the exact same circumstance. People only root for people who don't need it. Like the amount of times when I was on my lonely path where I was too different from the friends that I had, but not successful enough to be friends with the people that I wanted to be friends with. That's when you want people to root for you. That's when you want people to support you. Once you've already won, people are like, he's amazing, he's so good. But like, that's the time when you need it the least. And so you always have to be the person who roots for you before everyone else does. And it's usually a single clap in the auditorium for a very long period of time. It is a slow clap that's just you rooting for you. And that visual, I think, is one that you can kind of take because it is. And the path of the exceptional person is one of an exception, which means that you are not with other people. And rather than fighting that or bemoaning it, see it as an indicator that you're on the right path. Because if everyone else were cheering you on, then it means you're not in the right place, because it means you're just like everyone else, and that's not where you want to be. I think a hopeful message that anyone can think about who's in that hard period or in that start period is that it won't get harder. Like, this is the hardest part. And so if you can just make it through this, everything else is downhill. It's not that the things that the dragons are going to slay aren't going to get bigger. They are. But you become so much more equipped to slay them back. And you have so many more allies. You have people in the stands cheering for you. You have the audience. You have all of these other things that are behind you. But in the beginning, it's just you with a stick against a bear. And arguably, that fight is a harder fight to win than beating a dragon when you have a nuclear bomb and 6 nations behind you. And so it's not even like the size of the hardship, it's just also the resources and how few of them you have, and how so much of the beginning is literally burning the one thing you have, which is time. Because you have no leverage. You don't have the money to pay other people to help you. You don't have the resources to go like get someone no one can learn it for you. It's like there's a lot of the things that we care about a lot, like no one can work out for you. Doesn't matter how much money you have. No one can learn skills for you. And so in the early days, like, it feels so painful because you're like, you look around to see who can help you, and then you're like, fuck, it's me again. And I think getting comfortable with the idea that each of these things, kind of like Slumdog Millionaire, if you've seen that movie where I'll give you the TLDR, he goes through his entire life of randomness, and he gets on the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire version in India, and it has 12 questions to make $1 million. And from only 12 random experiences in his life that seemed meaningless at the time, was he able to answer all of the questions and then ultimately win. The skills that you develop along the way, like Steve Jobs learning calligraphy that then became Apple fonts that, transformed how we type. Those early days, that little trench winning in the weeds, oftentimes gives you these huge advantages later on because you have more context than anyone else. And so rather than lament them and hate the fact that you're going through it, remembering that these will be arrows that you put in the quiver that you're going to be using to slay the future bigger dragons. And so expecting it to be easy is what makes it much harder than it ever is. There's a quote that I love from Dr. Cashy. I'll probably butcher it, but experts have more ways to win than beginners do. And so if an expert goes into any setting that they're expert in, they have so many faster feedback loops that reward them in the moment before the ultimate outcome. So if you're a master video editor, there's so many things that you can do that while editing, you make one change and then it looks right. You have a positive feedback loop. And so I think when you're on the start path, you can't look at the outcome as the only positive, because you will never make it. And so the positive frame that I've always used is, sure, you can have the external ones of like, I like thinking about my first videos had like 13 views. And I'm like, well, if I had an audience of 13 people, I used to spend years pitching, weight loss stuff to rooms of 13, and that was fine. And so thinking about that way was helpful. But the most helpful frame was thinking about who I was becoming as the asset that I was building. So in real time, whenever I finished a long day's work, I was becoming more like the type of person who could work for 5 years without reward. And that would be part of the story I would someday tell. And so some of the biggest reinforcers I've had in my life has been future casting the story that I would tell about the shitty period that I was in. Like, I remember when I was sleeping on the floor at my gym because I didn't have enough money for 2 rents. And I was like, I will fucking tell this story. And when I lost everything for the first time, I have the screenshot of the bank account. Like, when I show it, people are like, oh, look, there's that thing. But they forget that there was a person who screenshotted it to be like, this won't fucking happen again. And I think having a larger narrative of where you're ultimately going, one, gives you the vision of where you're knows where he's going, but it allows the dragons that you have to slay along the way, the hard things that you have to overcome, to feed into the larger narrative of the story that you'll someday tell. And so, like, no one ever tells stories about the hero who made it all happen immediately and had no hardships. No one cares, right? Like, okay, you were born to a billionaire. Is there a story there? Not really. But everyone loves the story because we can see ourselves in the character and how much we hope to be like them. And it's the being like them, not the having what they have, that we usually like. And so reframing ourselves as the hero of that narrative in my harder times was what really got me through that, and thinking, I will tell this story someday.